My daughter refused to come to the hospital when I was on the brink of death, because she was busy celebrating her husband's birthday. I'm busy, she told me, even as the doctors pleaded with her to come quickly. 2 weeks later, I called the bank and took the steps I needed to take. Shortly after, my daughter stormed into my house in a panic, but by then, my decision was already made. Before we go on, please subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. The steady beeping pulled me back from a dark, distant place. My eyelids felt like slabs of concrete, but when I finally pried them open, harsh fluorescent lights pierced straight through my skull. "Mr. Dunn, can you hear me?" A woman's voice, professional, but gentle. I tried to respond, but my throat was raw like sandpaper. The room swam around me. White walls. Machines flashing with blinking lights. Tubes running from my arms. Every breath sent a sharp ache through my chest. "What?" I croaked. "What happened?" The nurse leaned closer. Her badge read Janet. She had kind eyes behind thin wire-rimmed glasses. "You had a heart attack, Mr. Dunn. You're in the ICU at Northwestern Memorial. It's Tuesday afternoon, April 15th. Tuesday? I remembered leaving for the grocery store Monday morning. Everything after that was blank. How long have I been here? Since yesterday evening. The paramedics brought you in around 7. She adjusted a monitor. You gave us quite a scare. A doctor entered then, young, worn down, stethoscope hanging around his neck like a symbol of authority. He pressed the cold metal to my chest, frowning at what he heard. Mr. Dunn, I'm Dr. Martinez. Your heart took significant damage, but you're stable for now. We'll need to monitor you very closely over the next few days. Will I recover? The question came out weaker than I wanted. With the right treatment and lifestyle changes, many patients do, he said, jotting notes on his clipboard. We'll go over medications, diet adjustments, and follow-up care. I nodded automatically, my engineer's brain cataloging the data. Heart attack. Significant damage. Close monitoring. The words felt detached, as though they described someone else's life. Janet adjusted my foredrip. Your blood pressure's improving. Are you feeling chest pain right now? Some. I shifted, wincing as pain shot across my ribs. Feels like someone's sitting on my chest? That's normal after what you've been through, Dr. Martinez assured me. We'll manage the pain with medication, but call if it worsens. The rest of the afternoon blurred into endless procedures, blood draws, EKGs, adjustments to machines. Nurses moved in and out with practiced precision, checking vitals, asking about pain, explaining equipment. By evening, I was deemed stable enough for a regular room. Janet coordinated the move, wheeling me through sterile corridors lined with identical doors. Room 347, she announced as we arrived. This should be more comfortable. The room had a window facing west. From it, I could see the city as dusk settled, Chicago's lights beginning to twinkle. From up here, it looked smaller, almost manageable, like the neat blueprints I used to pore over. Dr. Ellis will be by shortly, Janet said, checking the monitors one last time. He's your cardiologist. A good man. You'll like him. I sank into the pillows, exhaustion dragging me down. My body felt foreign, unreliable. At 68, I'd always taken pride in being independent, capable. Now I couldn't even sit up without help. Outside the window, the world kept moving. People driving home, families eating dinner, children playing. And here I was, tethered to machines that counted every beat of my damaged heart. A gentle knock at the door. Then a tall, distinguished man stepped in, silver-threaded hair and calm authority in his posture. His presence commanded quiet respect. Benjamin, I'm Dr. Grover Ellis. He pulled a chair close, opening a thick chart. How are you feeling tonight? Like I got hit by a truck, I admitted. But better than this morning, I guess. He smiled faintly, then grew serious. I need to be frank about your condition. The heart attack was severe, a STEMI. It struck the main artery supplying blood to your heart muscle. I nodded, my engineering background translating his words into mechanical failure. He slid an EKG printout across the table, the jagged lines like some cryptic artwork. See this section? That's where the damage occurred, your left anterior descending artery. We managed to reopen it with emergency medication, but you've lost about 20% of your heart muscle. I swallowed hard. And what does that mean for my future? With the right care, many patients go on to live full lives after heart attacks like yours, Dr. Ellis said. But I won't sugarcoat it, it was touch and go for several hours. He leaned forward slightly. Benjamin, I need to ask you something. Do you have family we should contact? Any emergency numbers? My chest tightened. I couldn't tell if it was from the heart attack or something deeper. My daughter, Agnes. She lives in Lincoln Park with her husband. Dr. Ellis glanced at his notes. I actually tried reaching her yesterday, when you were admitted. Your condition was critical. We weren't sure you'd survive the night. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. You spoke with her? I did. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Benjamin, I've been a cardiologist for 25 years. I've made countless calls to family members in situations like this. Usually, when I tell someone their father has suffered a massive heart attack and may not make it through the night. My voice cracked as I whispered. What did she say? Dr. Ellis looked down at his hands, then met my eyes with a kind of sorrow. She said she was busy, that it was her husband's birthday, and she couldn't leave the celebration. The words struck like a physical blow. My monitor beeped faster as my pulse spiked. Even after you told her that it might be my last night? He nodded gently. I did explain the severity. I told her you were asking for her. She said she tried to stop by sometime this week, if her schedule allowed. I stared at the ceiling, numb. The daughter I had raised, supported, and stood by through every trial of her life couldn't be bothered to leave a birthday party while I was dying. I'm deeply sorry to have to tell you this. Dr. Ellis continued. I debated whether it was best to share, but I believe patients deserve the truth about how their families respond in emergencies. No, you were right to tell me. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. I needed to know. He stayed a few more minutes, outlining medications and recovery steps, but I barely heard him. His words kept echoing in my mind. She was busy. Her husband's birthday. She couldn't leave the party. I'll check on you tomorrow morning, Dr. Ellis said at last, standing. Try to rest. Your body needs the strength. After he left, the silence in the room pressed down heavier than the machines. Only the steady beeping of the heart monitor broke it. Through the window, Chicago's lights stretched endlessly across the horizon. Each one represented a life, a choice, a set of priorities. Agnes had made hers clear. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the truth. I shifted in bed, searching for a comfortable position, but the ache in my chest no longer came from the heart attack. She was busy. It was her husband's birthday. I stared at the glowing city skyline, each twinkling bulb a reminder of families that cared, daughters who rushed to their fathers' sides when they were dying. Maybe Dr. Ellis had misunderstood. Maybe Agnes hadn't realized the gravity of the situation. She could be absent-minded, wrapped up in her own world. Surely she would have come if she truly grasped how dire things were. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the first time Agnes had put her own convenience ahead of my needs. It was simply the most brutal. My mind drifted back 23 years, to our kitchen table covered with acceptance letters. Agnes, bright-eyed and brimming with ambition, waving her letter from Northwestern University. Dad, I got in. Can you believe it? Of course I could believe it. I had helped her with every application, every essay. What I struggled to believe was the tuition bill, $40,000 a year. My engineer's salary was decent, but that kind of money meant years of overtime, no vacations, and pushing off any thought of retirement. But when I looked at her face, so full of promise and excitement, how could I say no? I worked 60-hour weeks for 4 straight years. Weekends buried in consulting projects. Holidays sacrificed to deadlines. My back ached constantly from leaning over blueprints, and I ran on nothing but coffee and determination. Agnes graduated magna cum laude. I had never been prouder. Then came the wedding. Martin Harper, a smooth-talking entrepreneur with big dreams and even bigger debts. I hadn't trusted him from the beginning, but Agnes was in love. She wanted her fairy tale. Dad, you only get married once. I want it to be perfect. $15,000 for a single day. The venue, the flowers, the photos, everything had to be top tier. I drained my vacation fund, borrowed against my pension, and took extra shifts until my hands shook with fatigue. The marriage lasted 2 years before they split. Then they reconciled. Then split again. Through every crisis, every reconciliation, every one of Martin's failed business schemes, I was there, always with my checkbook. Down payment for their first house, $12,000. Loan for Martin's restaurant that went bankrupt, $8,000. Emergency cash when Agnes lost her first job, $3,000. Car repair when their BMW gave out, $1,500. I kept mental tally over the years the way engineers tally load calculations. The total was staggering, well over $100,000. And that didn't include the countless weekends spent hauling their furniture, the birthday presents, the Christmas gifts that strained my budget year after year. And last night, while I lay here dying, Agnes couldn't bring herself to leave a party. I rolled onto my side, ignoring the tug of 4 lines, and stared out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, in the Lincoln Park condo I'd helped them buy, Agnes and Martin were probably laughing with friends, sipping overpriced wine, toasting another year of Martin's empty life. She'd try to visit this week if her schedule allowed. As if I were a dentist appointment she might reschedule. The anger rose slowly, beginning as a tight knot in my stomach, spreading upward until my chest burned with something that had nothing to do with heart failure. 68 years I had been the steady one. The reliable one. The man who sacrificed so others could thrive. And what had it earned me? A daughter who valued party planning over her father's life. A son-in-law who had never worked an honest day, yet lived in comfort on my generosity. And a lonely hospital room where I sat calculating the cruel arithmetic of unconditional love. I had given Agnes everything. Now it was time to see what she would do when that everything was on the line. My heart monitor ticked steadily in the dark. Each beat a reminder that I was still alive, and still in control of my choices, my money, my legacy. Agnes thought she could dismiss me, treat me as an afterthought, assume I'd always be there. She was about to discover how wrong she was. The morning sun filtered weakly through my hospital window as I swallowed the line of pills Nurse Janet had set out. 3 days had passed since Dr. Ellis delivered his devastating news, and though my heart was healing, something inside me was hardening. "Time for your walk, Mr. Dunn," said Rita, the physical therapist. Her cheerful tone grated against my mood, but I went along. We shuffled slowly down the hall, my legs shaky but stronger than the day before. The cardiac wing hummed with beeping monitors and soft voices. In room 352, I saw an elderly man sitting alone, staring at a wilted bouquet. "Good morning," I said, pausing in his doorway. He looked up with tired eyes. "Morning. You're the engineer from 347, right?" "Harold." "Benjamin," I said, leaning against the frame, grateful for the pause. "You look troubled." Harold gave a laugh without humor. "My son cleaned out my savings account while I wasn't here. $35,000. Said it was for his business." He gestured to the drooping flowers. These came with a card that said he was sorry. No visit. No call. Just sorry. His words hit like a blow. Another father. Another betrayal. "Family," Harold said bitterly. "They think we'll always forgive them because we're their parents." I returned to my room unsettled, his story echoing my own. That afternoon, I made my first phone call. "Chase Bank Customer Service, this is Michelle. This is Benjamin Dunn. I need information about revoking power of attorney on my accounts." "Of course, sir." I'll need to verify your identity first. After the usual security questions, she explained. To revoke power of attorney, you must appear in person with proper documentation and file formal revocation papers. What documentation? Photo ID, the original power of attorney document, and signed revocation forms. Processing takes 24 hours once filed. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. 2 years ago, when I'd had pneumonia, I'd signed over power of attorney to Agnes so she could manage my bills. At the time it seemed sensible. Now, it felt as though I'd handed her a loaded weapon. The following week dragged by in careful increments. Each day I walked farther, relied less on pain medication, ate solid food again. And each day, I gathered more information. On Wednesday, I called Thompson and Associates, the notary office downtown. For will modifications, the receptionist explained. Illinois law requires the testator to appear in person with 2 witnesses. We also recommend mental competency verification after any significant health issues. What does that entail? Usually a letter from your physician confirming you're competent to make legal decisions. Perfect. Dr. Ellis would provide that without hesitation. By Friday, my discharge plan was nearly complete. Agnes had called once during the week. A short, obligatory conversation in which she asked after my condition with all the enthusiasm of someone discussing the weather. I'm doing better, I told her. That's great, Dad, she replied. Martin and I have been so busy with his new consulting venture. We'll try to visit once you're home and settled. Try to visit. As if checking on her recovering father were a chore to be wedged between more pressing engagements. Thursday evening, I met Eleanor from room 341. She was recovering from gallbladder surgery. Her daughter hadn't visited once. 30 years I raised that girl, Eleanor confided as we sat in the hospital's small garden. Paid her tuition, planned her wedding, babysat her kids every weekend. When I needed surgery, she said she couldn't take time off work. Too important, she told me. I listened, hearing my own story mirrored in hers. We were a generation of parents who had poured everything into our children, only to find they had learned to take, but not to give back. What will you do? I asked. Eleanor's expression hardened. Change my will. Every penny goes to the animal shelter now. At least dogs are loyal. Her words stayed with me long after. Friday morning brought my final consultation with Dr. Ellis. He declared me fit for discharge, reviewed medications, and scheduled follow-ups. As he reached the door, he paused. Benjamin, he said gently, I hope you'll consider forgiveness. Holding on to anger isn't good for your heart, Dr. Ellis had said. I smiled, genuinely to my own surprise. Doctor, it isn't anger I'm holding on to. It's clarity. That night I sat by the window, watching the Chicago skyline glitter against the dark. Somewhere out there, Agnes and Martin were enjoying their comfortable life, built on my decades of sacrifice, indifferent to how close I'd come to death. Tomorrow, I would go home. Tomorrow, I would begin reclaiming control. The power of attorney would be revoked. The will would be rewritten. And Agnes would learn that taking her father for granted came with consequences she had never considered. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was seeking justice. And there is a difference. An engineer understands the precision required for both. The discharge process began promptly at 8 a.m. Dr. Martinez handed me a thick folder, papers, prescriptions, diet instructions, follow-up appointments. My signature wavered on the lines, but my resolve was steady. No heavy lifting for 6 weeks, he reminded me, checking boxes on his clipboard. And if you experience chest pain or shortness of breath, call immediately. I nodded, though my mind was already far ahead, occupied with matters more urgent than dietary restrictions. Dr. Ellis appeared as I was gathering the few belongings from my bedside table. He looked tired, the kind of weariness that comes from delivering too much bad news to too many families. Benjamin, I wanted to see you off personally. He sat at the edge of the bed. You've endured a tremendous ordeal, physically and emotionally. Give yourself time to heal before making any major decisions. Doctor, I said quietly, you've been more family to me these past 2 weeks than my own flesh and blood. I meant every word. Thank you for your honesty about Agnes. It was painful, but necessary. He studied me closely. Forgiveness can be healing, too. Sometimes people don't realize the weight of their choices until the consequences arrive to teach them. You're right about that, I replied, though I finished the thought in a way he hadn't intended. After he left, I signed the final forms. The discharge nurse, a young woman with kind eyes, wheeled me to the entrance despite my protests. Hospital policy, she explained lightly. Liability issues. The April air struck me like a revelation. 2 weeks of recycled hospital ventilation had made me forget how alive the real world could smell. Chicago sprawled before me, its streets busy with people whose families cared whether they lived or died. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out my phone. From weakness or anticipation, I couldn't be sure. Chase Bank Customer Service. This is Michelle. This is Benjamin Dunn. Account number 4478921. I need to revoke power of attorney on all accounts immediately. I can provide that information, Mr. Dunn, but the process requires your presence at a branch office with documentation. What documents? Photo ID, the original power of attorney papers, and signed revocation forms witnessed by a bank officer. I'll be there this afternoon. Which branch handles this? Our main downtown office, 125 South LaSalle. They're open until 4. Perfect. Enough time to go home, collect the papers, and begin reclaiming my life. I opened the rideshare app on my phone, still awkward with technology that felt clumsy compared to simply hailing a cab. My fingers moved deliberately across the screen, entering my Evanston address. The app told me Victor, my driver, would arrive in 8 minutes. 8 minutes to stand on the sidewalk, the weight of my decision settling around me like a familiar coat. A businessman rushed by, shouting into his phone about quarterly reports and missing his daughter's recital. A young mother pushed a stroller while juggling her own call about daycare schedules. Everyone around me had responsibilities, priorities, people who needed them. Everyone except me. But that was about to change. For 68 years, I had been the dependable one. The provider. The safety net for everyone else's dreams and failures. I had worked overtime to fund Agnes's education, drained my savings to pay for her wedding, sacrificed my retirement security to bail out her husband's failing ventures, yet when I lay at death's door, she couldn't be bothered to leave a party. My phone buzzed. Your driver, Victor, has arrived in a white Honda Accord. I watched as the car eased up to the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man with silver at his temples, stepped out and reached for my hospital bag. It was time to go home. Time to collect the power of attorney papers. Time to visit Chase Bank and begin taking back control of my financial life. Agnes had assumed she could dismiss me, treat me as an afterthought, take my presence for granted. She was about to learn how costly that assumption would be. Victor Ramirez moved with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years helping passengers into his car. His weathered face registered concern as I stepped through the hospital doors. Northwestern Memorial, he said softly. You okay, my friend? I'm better now, I replied, lowering myself into the seat. The car smelled faintly of coffee and pine air freshener. A rosary swung from the rearview mirror, and taped to the dashboard was a small photograph of a young man. Evanston, right? Sheridan Road? Victor confirmed, glancing at his GPS before merging into traffic. I nodded. Heart trouble? He asked bluntly. His candor surprised me. Most people skirted around such subjects. My father had 3 heart attacks, Victor continued as we headed toward Lake Shore Drive. Tough man. 40 years in construction. Each time, we thought it would be the end. Did your family rally around him? I asked. Victor let out a short, bitter laugh. The first time, yes. By the third, my siblings complained about the hospital visits getting in the way of their lives. He caught my eyes in the mirror. Family's complicated, isn't it? The question lingered between us as we merged onto Lakeshore Drive. To our right, Lake Michigan churned under the sharp April wind, while the city skyline grew smaller in the distance. My daughter couldn't even leave her husband's birthday party, I found myself admitting. The doctor told her I might not survive the night, and she stayed put. Victor's hands tightened on the wheel. Ah, man. That cuts deep. How old is she? 42. Old enough to understand what matters. You'd think so, he murmured. He gestured toward the photograph taped to his dashboard. That's my son, Eduardo. Lives in Los Angeles now. Big shot marketing executive. Fancy house, expensive car. You must be proud, I offered. I was, Victor said flatly. Haven't heard from him in 5 years. Last time we spoke, he asked me to stop calling. Said it embarrassed him when his colleagues knew his father was just a taxi driver. His words struck me like a physical blow. Here was someone who understood the quiet devastation of being discarded by the very child you'd sacrificed everything for. How do you live with that kind of betrayal? I asked quietly. Victor steered us off the Belmont exit, north through Lincoln Park. I learned something, Benjamin. Family isn't only blood. Family is who shows up when you need them. Who answers at midnight. Who waits in hospital corridors. We passed the neighborhood where Agnes and Martin lived, likely 8 blocks west of where we drove. Their condo, no doubt, was still filled with the luxury furniture I had helped them afford. After Eduardo cut me out, Victor went on, I spent 2 years furious. Bitter, resentful, always asking where I went wrong. Then it hit me, I was still giving him power over my happiness. Even after he'd abandoned me. So what did you do? I started living for myself, Victor said simply. Took trips I'd always dreamed of, learned guitar, made friends who wanted me around. Turned out I'm decent company, once I stopped wasting time on ungrateful children. For the first time, his smile reached his eyes. By then, we were in Evanston, passing the university campus where I had once delivered Agnes so she could pursue the education I'd worked myself ragged to afford. Students strode past with backpacks and dreams, many of them sustained by parents who believed that sacrifice equaled love. Victor turned down my street. The truth is, he said, they think we'll always be there. Always forgive. Always bail them out. But sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for an ungrateful child is let them face the weight of their own choices. My house came into view, a modest 2-story colonial with a small yard I had cared for faithfully until my health faltered. The house looked smaller somehow, less imposing, almost diminished, compared to when I'd left for groceries 2 weeks ago. Victor eased into the driveway and turned toward me. Benjamin, I don't know all the details, he said. But if your daughter ignored you when you were on your deathbed, maybe it's time she learned what life looks like without her father's safety net. He helped me out of the car, refusing the tip I offered. My number's saved in your phone now, he said, pressing a business card into my hand. You need anything, rides, groceries, or just someone to talk to, you call me. That's what real family does. I stood in the driveway, watching as his white Honda disappeared down the street, his words echoing in my head. Family is the one who shows up when you need them. Agnes hadn't shown up. But Victor had. Dr. Ellis had. Even Harold and Eleanor, fellow patients, had shown me more kindness than my own daughter. It was time to live for myself. Time for Agnes to learn what consequences felt like. The key turned in the front lock with a familiar click, the sound flooding me with relief. Home. The air inside was slightly stale from being shut tight, but it was mine. My sanctuary. My domain. The doorbell rang violently, followed by a barrage of heavy knocking. I had barely set my hospital bag down when the pounding grew more insistent. Through the frosted glass, I could make out 2 shapes on the porch. Dad, open up! We know you're in there! Agnes's voice, sharp and commanding, carried the same fury I remembered from her teenage years. But this time it was edged with something else, panic. I opened the door. My daughter and son-in-law stood there like an invading force. Agnes barged past me without invitation, Martin swaggering in behind her. "What the hell did you do with the power of attorney?" Agnes snapped. Her sleek hair was disheveled, her expensive suit wrinkled. "The bank called us an hour ago. Are you insane?" I closed the door with deliberate calm, buying myself a moment to steady my breath. "I was dying in Northwestern Memorial," I said evenly. "And you were at a birthday party." The words hung in the air like a blade. Martin stepped forward, using his height like a weapon. "Old man, you don't know what you're messing with. You need supervision. The heart attack scrambled your judgment." "My judgment," I said, leading them into the living room, my ground, "told me to revoke access to people who couldn't bother visiting their dying father." Agnes flushed crimson. "We didn't know it was that serious. The doctor made it sound routine. Dr. Ellis told you I might not survive the night." My voice stayed calm, deliberate. "You said you were busy." "That's not, how did you?" Agnes stammered, realizing too late she'd exposed herself. Martin clutched her arm, cutting her off. "Listen, Benjamin, you're confused," he said. "Heart attacks cause memory lapses. You're mixing things up. We were there." I lowered myself into my armchair. "The one I bought with overtime pay after covering Agnes's wedding costs." "You're lying." "To my face. In my own living room." "Dad, you're being manipulated by hospital staff," Agnes pleaded, her tones slipping into that familiar, wheedling voice she'd used as a child when cornered. "They filled your head with nonsense to turn you against us. Get out." The words came low, steady, absolute. Martin's jaw tightened. "You can't just throw us out. We're family. We have rights. This is my house," I said, standing tall despite my weakness. "You have no rights here. You're trespassing." Agnes stepped between us, her polished mask cracking. "Dad, please. Be reasonable. You're making a huge mistake, one that affects all of us." "The only mistake I made," I said coldly, "was trusting you with my life savings." Martin's fists clenched. "Ungrateful old fool. We've sacrificed so much for you. Agnes has spent years managing your affairs, and this is how you repay her? Sacrificed?" The word burned bitter on my tongue. "I paid for your failed restaurant. I cleared your debts. I handed you the down payment for your condo. Tell me, what exactly have you sacrificed?" Martin's glare hardened. Agnes shot him a warning look, but it was too late. Their truth was laid bare. I walked to the front door and swung it open. "Get out. Now." Agnes's expression twisted, her mask completely gone. Cold calculation stared back at me. "This isn't over, Dad. We'll fight this. We'll prove you're not competent to make these decisions." As Martin brushed past me, he leaned close, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You have no idea what you've started, old man." They slammed the door behind them hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood frozen for a long moment, listening to their car doors slam, the engine roar to life, and then the tires screech as they sped away. When silence finally returned, it wasn't peaceful. If I'd still been wearing a heart monitor, its beeping would have been frantic. With trembling fingers, I turned the deadbolt. The metallic click echoed through my now quiet home. The stillness felt heavy, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Crossing the living room, I noticed a throw pillow knocked askew where Agnes had gestured wildly during her tirade. Straightening it felt oddly significant, as if restoring order erased just a sliver of their violation. "We'll prove you're not competent to make these decisions." Her parting threat replayed as I walked unsteadily into the kitchen. My legs still felt weak from both the confrontation and the long morning. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. Tea had always been my drink for thinking, for steadying myself. The familiar ritual grounded me. As I waited for the water to boil, I turned over everything that had just happened. They'd driven straight from the bank to ambush me. No call. No attempt at civility. Just accusations, demands, and threats inside my own home. Martin's behavior was especially telling, the way he called me old man, the way he loomed with his sighs, his whispered threat in my own living room. That wasn't grief. That wasn't concern. That was fear. Desperation. The kettle whistled, sharp and clear. I poured the boiling water over Earl Grey leaves, watching the amber color bloom and swirl. My hands had steadied. Carrying my tea to the living room, I stood at the window facing the street. Agnes's BMW was gone, yet the echo of their intrusion still lingered. You can always feel when someone's been in your home, even after they've left. We have rights. We'll fight this. Martin's words gave more away than he intended. Their anger wasn't only about access to my accounts, they were panicked. Which meant they had been leaning on my money more heavily than I'd realized. I sat in my reading chair, angled just right to catch the afternoon light. Outside, Mrs. Rodriguez tended her garden, and the mailman worked his route. Normal suburban life carried on, oblivious to the shift in my world. And in that moment, something became clear: canceling the power of attorney wasn't enough. If they were bold enough to storm my home and threaten me, they'd be bold enough to escalate further. We'll prove you're not competent. That wasn't an empty threat, it carried legal weight. If they convinced the court that my heart attack had compromised my mind, they could strip me of control entirely. Guardianship proceedings. My independence gone with the stroke of a judge's pen. I reached for the notebook I'd used for decades of engineering calculations. Now I used it for a different kind of problem, protecting myself. On the page I wrote, Agnes and Martin, financially desperate. Willing to use legal system against me. Stronger protections required. The afternoon sun slanted across my familiar room, warming the space where I had spent countless quiet evenings reading and planning. That life was gone now. They had seen to that. Victor's words during the ride home returned to me. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for ungrateful children is let them face the consequences of their choices. Canceling the power of attorney had been consequence number one. If they wanted to escalate, I was prepared to show them just how costly their greed would be. I picked up the phone. Time to call Thompson and Associates about updating my will. 2 days later, as I collected my mail, Mrs. Rodriguez approached me. Normally cheerful, she looked hesitant, almost uncomfortable. "Benjamin," she said softly, "how are you feeling after your incident?" The word incident sent alarms ringing in my mind. I'd known Maria Rodriguez for 15 years. She had never spoken to me with such awkward caution. "I'm recovering well, thank you," I replied evenly. "Why do you ask?" She glanced at her house, then back at me, her voice uneasy. "Your daughter came by yesterday. She seemed very concerned about you living alone after the heart attack." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice calm. "Agnes was here? She said you've become forgetful, confused at times. That maybe you need supervision." Maria's tone carried genuine worry, but beneath it was doubt. "Doubt about me? What exactly did she tell you?" I asked. Maria shifted her gardening gloves nervously. "That you've been making irrational financial choices. Canceling important arrangements without really understanding the consequences. She asked me to keep an eye on you, to call her if you seemed unstable." The strategy was suddenly clear. This wasn't just about court filings or threats at my doorstep. They were poisoning the well, seeding doubt in my neighbors, my community, anyone who might be called upon as a witness. "Maria," I said gently, "did I seem confused or unstable last week when we talked about your rose garden?" Her shoulders relaxed, relief softening her face. "No. You were perfectly fine. You gave me excellent advice about the aphid problem. Then trust that judgment over gossip," I said. 3 days later, I walked into Chase Bank downtown to finalize additional security measures on my accounts. Afterward, the branch manager, Janet Chen, pulled me aside. "Mr. Dunn," she said quietly, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but your daughter came in yesterday. She asked about procedures for financial guardianship." I spread through my veins. Guardianship? She wanted to know what medical documentation is required to have someone declared incapable of managing their finances. I told her I couldn't share details. Janet hesitated, then lowered her voice. She seemed especially interested in claims of post-heart attack cognitive decline. Did she file any paperwork? I asked. No, Janet said, but she scheduled a consultation with our legal department for next week. I thanked her and left the bank, a growing sense of urgency tightening in my chest. Agnes wasn't bluffing. She was actively researching how to have me declared incompetent. By the following Tuesday, the full scope of their campaign began to show. At Brewster's Coffee, where I'd been a regular for over a decade, Tom Brewster's usual warmth was missing. "Benjamin," he said, hesitating just slightly, "good to see you're managing okay." Even Tom, who had known me since Agnes was in college, was treating me as if my mind might be slipping. "Tom," I asked carefully, "did someone suggest I wasn't managing well?" His face flushed. "Your daughter and her husband stopped by. They said you'd been having difficulties since the hospital. That you were making impulsive choices, getting confused with money." I ordered my usual black coffee, paid with exact change, and chatted about the Cubs' chances this season. As the conversation flowed, Tom relaxed, the doubt fading. "You seem fine to me," he admitted as I prepared to leave. "That's because I am fine," I told him. "Remember that when anyone suggests otherwise." That evening, I sat in my kitchen, piecing together the evidence of their coordinated character assassination. 3 neighbors. My bank. Local businesses. Agnes and Martin were weaving a narrative of cognitive decline, planting witnesses who could later testify to my supposed incompetence. The engineer in me almost admired the precision of their strategy, even as I felt deeply violated. They had weaponized my own community against me. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Agnes and Martin, Organized Competency Challenge Campaign. Timeline 1 week. Targets, neighbors, bank, businesses. Goal, establish pattern of decline guardianship." Beneath it, I added counter-strategy required. Immediate action essential. Then I picked up the phone. "This is Benjamin Dunn. I need to move up my will modification appointment. How soon can we meet?" "We have an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m., the assistant replied. "I'll be there." I understood now that this wasn't a family disagreement. It was war, on my independence, my reputation, and my right to live my own life. They thought an elderly man with a heart attack would be easy prey. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The elevator carried me to the 14th floor of the LaSalle Street building. Through its glass walls, Chicago stretched below, a city where families either supported one another or tore each other apart. At last, I knew which kind mine had chosen to be. James Mitchell's office occupied a corner suite with sweeping windows over Lake Michigan. His receptionist, efficient and composed, led me into a conference room where Mitchell waited. Legal papers lay neatly spread across a polished mahogany table. "Mr. Dunn, please have a seat," he said. Mitchell was around 50, his temples touched with gray, his manner deliberate, the air of a man who had managed countless family disputes. "Before we begin," he said, "I need to ask you a few standard questions to confirm your competency." I appreciated his bluntness. "Go ahead. What's today's date?" "May 12, 2025. Tuesday. Who's the current president?" "Donald Trump," I answered dryly. "Unfortunately." Mitchell gave a brief smile. "And can you tell me why you're here?" "I want to revoke my existing will completely and draft a new one. This one will disinherit my daughter and son-in-law entirely." "That's a serious step," Mitchell said, studying me. "Are you certain?" I pulled my notebook from my jacket, the one I'd used to record every move Agnes and Martin had made against me since my heart attack. "I've spent the last 3 weeks documenting their behavior," I explained. "They've manipulated neighbors, tried to paint me as incompetent, and even threatened me in my own home." Mitchell paged through my notes, his expression professional but intent. "This is detailed documentation. What specifically pushed you to this decision? I leaned forward. My daughter couldn't be bothered to leave her husband's birthday party when I was in the hospital fighting for my life. And when I took back control of my finances, they tried to destroy my reputation. That was the last straw. I see. Mitchell made notes of his own. Illinois law does allow total disinheritance, but we'll need to ensure this new will can withstand any competency challenges they bring. What kind of challenges? I asked. They could argue the heart attack impaired your judgment, that you're no longer mentally fit to make such decisions. Mitchell explained. Your documentation helps, but I'll add explicit wording to prevent those challenges. For the next hour, Mitchell carefully drafted language that would make the will airtight. The new document left everything, my house, savings, investments, and personal belongings, to the American Heart Association. Agnes and Martin would receive precisely $1 each, to prove I hadn't forgotten them. This clause here, Mitchell said, pointing to a paragraph he just typed, states that you are of sound mind and body, that this decision was made after deliberate consideration, and that any attempt to contest it on the grounds of incompetency will result in forfeiture of even the $1 bequest. Perfect. 2 witnesses from Mitchell's office, paralegals who had never met me before, entered the conference room. Their role was simple: to provide independent confirmation of my mental state during the signing. Mr. Dunn, Mitchell asked formally, do you understand the contents of this will? I understand completely. I'm leaving my entire estate to charity and disinheriting my daughter and son-in-law. Are you making this decision freely, without pressure or coercion? Absolutely. Freely. It's the most rational choice I've ever made. I signed my name with steady hands. The same hands that had drawn engineering blueprints for 4 decades. The witnesses added their signatures beneath mine, and Mitchell notarized the document with his seal. This will is now legally binding, he said, placing the original into his office safe. Tomorrow I'll file a copy with the Cook County Probate Court. Your estate is secure. Walking back to the elevator, I felt lighter than I had in months. Agnes and Martin had launched a war on my competence, my reputation, and my independence. Now they would learn the price of that war. The elevator carried me back down to street level, back to a world where I was no longer prey to my family's greed. 3 days later, I sat in my living room, watching the afternoon shadows stretch across the same carpet where Agnes and Martin had threatened me 2 weeks earlier. The signed will rested in Mitchell's safe, but its true strength lay in my knowledge. Their financial future had just vanished. At exactly 4 p.m. I dialed Agnes's number, timed so I'd catch them both at home, giving them hours to sit with what I was about to reveal. Dad, Agnes answered, sounding surprised, maybe even pleased. How are you feeling? Much better, actually. I'm calling to inform you of something important. My tone was casual, almost light. I've changed my will. Silence stretched for several long beats. Changed it how? Completely? When I die, you'll receive nothing. What? What are you talking about? Her voice pitched higher. Nothing? That's impossible. Everything now goes to the American Heart Association. You and Martin will each receive exactly $1, so there's no confusion that I forgot you. There was a clatter, as though she'd dropped the phone, followed by hurried whispering. Then Martin's voice cut in. Benjamin, you can't be serious about this. Dead serious, Martin. The new will was signed 3 days ago, witnessed, notarized, and filed with probate court. Agnes's voice returned, shaking now. Dad, this is crazy. You can't just, we need to talk about this face to face. Feel free to come over, I said. The line went dead. I made myself a cup of tea and settled into my chair with a book, the golden afternoon light warming the room. Somewhere across the city, Agnes and Martin were having a very different kind of afternoon. They arrived in 47 minutes. I timed it. The doorbell rang with the same aggressive urgency as before, but this time, I held all the power. Agnes rushed inside the moment I opened the door, Martin close behind. But their posture had changed entirely. Gone was the arrogance, the intimidation. Now they looked smaller. Defeated. Desperate. "Dad, please," Agnes begged, her composure finally cracked. Her hair was mussed, her tailored suit wrinkled from pacing. "Tell me this is some kind of joke." "No joke," I said flatly. "Legal documents don't come with punchlines." Martin stepped closer, trying his usual intimidation tactics. "Old man, you don't know what you're doing. This decision affects more than just us." "Really? Who else does it affect?" "Our future, our plans, our—" He cut himself off before admitting what we all knew, their complete financial dependence on me. Agnes collapsed onto the couch without asking, her hands trembling. "Daddy, I've made mistakes, I know I have. But cutting me out completely? That's not who you are." "You're right. The father who tolerated your neglect and cruelty died in Northwestern Memorial. I'm someone different now. We can fix this," she pleaded, her voice slipping into the same tone she used as a child when she'd broken something expensive. "I'll change. I'll call every day. I'll be better." "Agnes, where were you on April 14th, while I was dying?" She froze. How do you know about? Dr. Ellis told me everything. How you couldn't leave Martin's birthday party. How you said you'd try to visit if your schedule allowed?" Martin's face darkened. That doctor violated confidentiality. He told a patient how his own family responded to his emergency. "That's not a violation, that's honesty." Agnes began to cry, real tears streaming down her face. "I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake. But you can't punish me forever." "I'm not punishing you for your life," I said calmly, sitting across from her while she unraveled. "I'm punishing you for the rest of mine." Martin knelt beside her, lowering both of them beneath my eye level. "Please, Benjamin, we're begging you. Don't do this. Now you know how it feels," I said evenly. "To be abandoned when you need someone most." Agnes looked up at me through streaks of mascara, her face a battlefield of defeat. "Please, Daddy. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught?" Martin pulled her to her feet, his desperation twisting into anger. "Fine. If this is the game you want, we'll see about that." "What game, Martin?" "The competency hearing," he snapped. "We'll prove you're unfit. That heart attack scrambled your brain, made you paranoid, vindictive. No rational man destroys his family over a misunderstanding." Agnes wiped her face, trying to reassemble her businesslike mask. "Dad, we've already spoken to people, your neighbors, your bank. They're worried about your condition. About your decision-making." I stood, using my full height to press the truth down on them. "You mean the lies you've been spreading? The manipulation campaign you've been running? It's not manipulation when it's true." Martin spat. "You're old, you're sick, and you're not thinking clearly. The only unclear decision I ever made," I said, "was trusting you with my finances for 2 years." Agnes moved to block me. "We're not leaving until you agree to reconsider. You're not staying regardless." I brushed past her toward the door. "This is still my house." Martin stepped into my path. "You'll regret this, Benjamin. We'll fight the wool with everything we've got." "With what money?" I asked. "Oh, right. You don't have any." The truth hit them both at once. Without access to my accounts, without the promise of inheritance, they had no resources to mount a legal fight. Agnes went pale. "You can't just abandon us like this." "Watch me." Martin's fists clenched. "You think you're clever, but you're just a bitter old man, dying alone." "Better alone," I said, "than surrounded by people who see me as an ATM." "This isn't over," Agnes hissed, her grief burning into rage. "We'll contest this. We'll prove you're incompetent. You'll do exactly what you did when I was dying." I cut in. "Nothing." I opened the front door wide. "Because when it matters, you only think of yourselves." As Martin passed, he leaned close, his whisper sharp as a knife. You don't know what you've started. This war isn't over. Agnes lingered in the doorway, her face twisted with equal parts pain and calculation. I'm still your daughter, no matter what legal papers say. And daughters have rights. Daughters who show up have rights, I said coldly. Daughters who abandon their fathers have consequences. They left, but not quietly. Agnes slammed the door hard enough to shake the windows. From the living room, I could hear their voices spilling into the neighborhood, arguing over blame, strategies, and lawyers they couldn't afford. I locked the door and returned to my chair as their car roared away. The house felt peaceful again, though I knew it wouldn't last. They meant their threats. They would contest the will, claim incompetency, fight for what they believed was theirs. But I had been designing solutions to complex problems for 40 years. Every structure I built was meant to withstand pressure, weather, and time. This legal structure would be no different. Outside, the Chicago evening settled over the street. Somewhere across the city, Agnes and Martin were plotting their next move. But here, in my own home, built with my hands and my mind, I was exactly where I belong. The phone rang. I let it ring. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.